WhiskyJason here, whiskey from the viewpoint of an American over here in Germany, often reviewing rare and exotic whiskeys. For us in Germany, these are Penelope, 4-grain bourbon, architect, toasted barrel, barrel proof. These just hit the market over here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you a little story about how to create a brand. I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story of how to sell that brand for an amazing amount of money. And then I'm going to very briefly review these 4 whiskeys and tell you my personal opinion of the batches we have over here in Germany. Now, these are the 750 milliliter bottles. They put little stickers on the back, 700. They didn't even try to put on top of the label here, 750s, the word 700 milliliters, but that's okay. All right, so we have in the year 2018, that's 6 years ago, okay? We got a guy, his name is Mike Palladini. His wife is expecting a child. They find out it's a girl. They're going to name the girl Penelope. And what does he have as an idea? Hey, let's start a whiskey brand. Let's start a bourbon brand named Penelope. I don't know about you, but I associate with Penelope nice, soft, smooth, elegant. Those are words Penelope. Oh, that's a strong name. It's an old name, but a strong name. I like it. So with his childhood friend, Danny Polizzi, he starts the company in the middle of New Jersey. Now, New Jersey doesn't really have a history of distilling or actually being the mega center of bourbon branding. But hey, Mike knows what he's doing together with his wife Kelly, and they actually have a brand. Penelope, big P on the bottles. Now we need whiskeys. Where do you go for whiskeys? You go to MGP. MGP, the maker of whiskey in Lawrenceburg, Indiana, they back in 2018 still had casks that they were willing to sell to people. And Mike says, hey, I'm going to buy a lot, either 100 or 1,000 barrels, and I'll buy the whiskey and I'm going to bottle it. And not just that, he actually created from 3 different mash bills a 4-grain whiskey. And he bottled it for with 80 proof, 40% ABV. Now this bottle over here is $49.90. That's 50 euros. I can get 2 bottles for 1 bottle of this of Wild Turkey 101. I can get 2 bottles of Buffalo Trace. I can get 2 bottles of Jack Daniels. I can get 2 bottles of Jim Beam, or take your pick. So the price is, I'm going to say the word steep. All right, for 50 euros for a 40% whiskey, for an 80 proof whiskey. But hey, it's got a beautiful bottle. And I do really, really commend them on the beauty of the bottles, on the beauty of the labeling. Here they have the labels. Here they actually have it imprinted on the glass for the higher level products. Now over here, the next thing is, I'm going to go over here. We are like, okay, if we have the normal, I'm not even sure this is the real history of the company, but if we have the normal 40 proof, we need to have a barrel strength. So they called it barrel strength, not barrel proof. This one is 58% ABV, same exact mash bill, 4-grain, same 3 different mash bills put together here. And they have this over here in Germany now for a price of 79, no, it's 85 euros. So 50 euros, 85 euros. Take this, add water, you get this. All right, so now that we have our barrel strength, now that we have our normal 4-grade bourbon, exactly the same, just less water in this, more water in this. They're like, okay, I have an idea. Let's make something with French oak staves. Now notice I did not say barrels. If you read very carefully, it always says French oak staves. I'm just going to reach over here and grab this. Maker's Mark. Maker's 46. We know this, all right? So what do? I was in Loretto, Kentucky. You saw the barrels. They had the little French oak staves. They weren't even staves. They were just little thin strips of wood that they had toasted before from French oak, and they put those on like a clothes hanger type of system with little clips and put it in the barrel for a couple of weeks. That's what this is, that French oak stave finish. That's what this is. And I want to thank Kenny here from Bourbon Pursuit for pointing that out to me. I was like reading the literature and I was like, okay, toasted barrel, barrel strength, staves. Now think of all the French oak finished products you've had from America in the last couple of years. Davies County, Penelope, Makers 46. They all use this stave immersion system, which is not forbidden. You can put staves in barrels, and that's what we have. So now this has 52%. So we go from 40, 58, 52. And the architect over here in Germany at the moment is 80 euros. So my favorite toasted barrel. Now, toasted barrel, of course, is the most expensive. What else, Jason? So, and we have a price of 89 euros on this. We have exactly 50% ABV. And we have normal, just like this, just like this. Before this gets its staves, this gets a whole new barrel. It's heavily toasted. Now, my question of the day is, what other products do you know of that have that toasted barrel moment? Peerless, toasted barrel, yummy. RD1 rye, toasted barrel, very yummy. Sagamore, double oak, toasted barrel, lightly charred, heavily toasted, wave barrel. Penelope. And there are dozens more out there. Which toasted barrels can you recommend? All right, so we have a little bit of the product range. I'll try them in a moment, give you a little bit of my personal opinion. Now let's go back over to our wonderful hero of the story, Mike, and his wife, Carrie. 2018, they started calling up stores. They started cold calling, heading the pavement, trying to get their products in as many stores as possible in as many states. Now, we do have a 3-tier system, but my real question is, if you're a NDP, non-distilling producer, do you still need to have, if you're on the 3-tier system, aren't you at tier 2? You have producers, you have distributors, and you have retailers. If I think of this correctly, these people are tier 2. They're like distributors. They're not making the whiskey. They're not producing the whiskey. So they could sell it maybe, at least in some states, at least directly to the retailer, and they could give it to the customers. Now, I'm going to say this, and I've said this before, it's not easy to make good whiskey. It's not easy to wait 4 to 6 to 10 years before that whiskey is finished and ready to be bottled. But it's actually more difficult to get that whiskey out there to the lips of the people that want to try it through distribution than it is to make the whiskey itself. That is the hard part. That is even sometimes a capital intensive part. And there's a lot of work goes into getting those bottles to those customers. I'm going to be a little bit nasty, but if you make the whiskey on day 1, you put it in the barrel on day 2, you let it rest in the warehouse for the next, I'm going to say 5 years, which is 1,500 days plus. And then you have another day of pulling the barrels, another day of dumping the barrels, and another day of bottling those barrels. So in order to make the whiskey, it's maybe 5 days of touching the product, but by the time it gets to the store, there's a lot more involved in manpower. Don't believe me? Ask a producer, ask a retailer. All right. Sorry for busting that illusion of the gods of whiskey making, and that's the tough part. No, the tough part is getting it to your lips. All right, so Mike Palladini has the wonderful fortune of sourcing from MGP. NGP and Lawrence, Indiana, they have their George Remus, they have their Rossville Union, their rye, their bourbon. Uh, Now, along comes the year. We are now in 2021. And, whoops. So in 2021, MGP acquires a St. Louis-based company called Lexco. Now, Lexco owns the Lex Row Distillery in Bardstown, Kentucky. They produce the brands like Ezra Brooks, Rebel, it used to be called Yell, but now Rebel. Davis County uses the same staves, by the way, as our architect for $475 million. So they tried to sell it a little bit in the press release as a merger. Cash flowed. It was an acquisition. All right. So Lexco has had fairly good distribution of their products. They even have distribution here in Germany. They work together with a company called Perola, Perola, and they've been bringing over products from MGP now since 2022, basically, for the last 2 years. And now comes the interesting thing. In the year 2023, MGP was kind of like, well, distribution is still kind of tough. There's a brand out there. It's been out there for 5 years. Penelope, doing a great job, has a wonderful reputation. They have distribution in many, many states, even 4 different countries on top of that. Let's buy him. Let's buy Mike out. Mike has been working his butt off for 5.5 years here. Let's offer him $105 million. If there's certain performance conditions met, he can even get $110.8 million in 2025. And Mike was smart enough to say yes. That's $20 million a year for him, his wife, and his daughter for 5 years of busting butt. Now, I've been doing this YouTube channel for basically 8 years in German and about 6.5 years in English. If somebody came along and offered me $100 million to the channel, I would hand it over on a silver tablet and say, here you go. Now, I know it's a totally different story, but that's a lot. Don't forget, he doesn't produce the whiskey himself. He buys it from the person who bought his company. This has to be one of the best deals in the whiskey brand world in the last 20 years. Hey, sell me your products. I'm going to make my own little brand named after my daughter. And you, after 5.5 years, you just come over and buy the brand for $100+ million. And MGP was like, good deal, do that. Even though they have their own products, even though they just bought a couple of years before that Lexro, but yet they still paid big money for this. And that's, for me, a lesson learned in wonderful brand building. Mike did a wonderful job here, and I must admit, I'm jealous, and I'm very, very proud of him. All right, so brief tasting here. You came here for the tasting. I gave you a history lesson. Not the first time on this channel. 4 grain, 3 different mash bills, 40%, 80 proof. Good whiskey, solid C. It's a little thin. 40% really doesn't wow me. I have a little bit of honey. As I said, I could buy 2 bottles of Buffalo Trace over here, 2 bottles of Wild Turkey, 2 bottles of Jim Beam, 2 bottles of Jack Daniels. Take your pick instead of one of these. It's just too expensive for what it offers. The Architect, 79 euros over here. Those French oak staves. Now on the nose, I get sawdust and freshly cut oak. This is over oaked in my opinion. I have batch number. I have no idea what batch number I have. There is no batch number on here. What a shame. This is way too much oak. I have a different bottle of the Architect, has less oak. But this is just very, 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 very oaky. Hmm. I prefer the Maker's Mark 46 over the normal Maker's Mark. Wow, that's got oak. Sawdust almost. Astringency. Now, to be very honest, if I just pour my Architect into my 4-grain and try that, so we're now at 46% if I did 50-50, which I tried to do. That's where it should be. And the oak strength. Now, some people love over oaked wood products. I like to have a good oak without too much, and this has a little bit too much for me. All right. So if I just go briefly over here to the barrel strength with, now we're going to go to the toasted. Toasted, 89 euros. That's 90 euros. That's almost like $100 for this bottle. Good. Marshmallows, honey, light oak. 50% alcohol, almost perfection. Tiny little bit of oak spice towards the end, that's too much. But for a new charred oak barrel plus a new heavily toasted barrel, that's delicious. This is B- whiskey. 90 euros, 50% C whiskey. Architect, C-, too much wood for me. Value for money, C- with 80 euros. Penelope, C. It actually beats this in the taste test, but D for value for money. I would not go out and pay 50 euros for this again. Now the barrel proof. The barrel proof and the 4-grain identical. This has maybe no water in it with 58%. This has more water in it. That's the only difference. Same mash bills, same 4-grain, same age, all the same. And we just take the same product, put it with the French oak staves, and here we put the same product into a second toasted barrel. Genius marketing with beautiful, beautiful bottles here. Even here, with the labels, very, very nice. Very tall, very elegant bottles. I think of Penelope. The barrel strength actually smells a tad bit better than it tastes. I get more of the oak. With water, it tames it down a little bit. I get a tiny little bit of Cheerios on the nose, even though they are oats predominantly. And here it's the mash bill. Let's see if I can talk about this really, really quick here. The barrel strength has the mash bill here of 74% corn, 16% wheat, 7% rye, 3% malted barley. So are we consistent with that? No, the toasted has a different mash bill. 74% corn, 21% rye, 5% malted barley. I did not know that. The toasted has no wheat. All right, so the Architect has the same 75, 15, 7% rye, and 3%. Okay, so the toasted has a different mash bill. Interesting. So that was new for me. I just learned something. Yeah. Okay, very, very good. And the toasted barrel is char 5 and heavily toast. All right, my question of the day is, what other toasted products do you enjoy? What other Penelope products have you tried that are good? I have the Core series. We have the Copper series, which would be Murillo, Rosé Cask Finish, Valencia, Tocaya Cask Finish. There's limited releases. There are private selects. There's a toasted rye. There's private barrels and the Founder's Reserve, which is part of the American Light Whiskey. MGP made that as well. So the American Light Whiskey is 99% corn, 1% malted barley. Why is there 1% malted barley in their light whiskey? So that it could actually be sold in Scotland and the European Union, because in Scotland the rule is if you do not have barley in your whiskey, it's not whiskey. Look it up. It's crazy. And so they put 1% into their light whiskey. So that could be sold in Scotland, which used back then when the light whiskey was introduced, the laws of Scotland. European Union 2018 is when we actually got our last revision for our rules. What is whiskey? And that's when we introduced the term single malt. Up until 2018, there were products out there in Europe that were 100% malted rye, and they were calling themselves single malt because it was malted rye. Okay, WhiskyJason here, whiskey from the viewpoint of an American over here in Germany, giving you a history lesson as well as short, very brief review of Penelope. I wish them all the luck in the future, and this is a excellent case study of how to make money, print money in a 5-year period. This is amazing. Well done, Mike and Kelly. Bye-bye.